Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats, podcast episode number 198. I'm your host today, Dan Matson, a.k.a. Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the world. Thanks for tuning in today, folks, and joining me for this episode. We're getting close to number 200, which is pretty exciting. Today's featured interview is a conversation I had with Colin Angus at the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival. Colin's a fascinating guy. He's done some amazing physical feats, including traveling around the world, completely around the world, by human power, including boats, bicycles, rowing, that sort of thing. And on this episode, we talk about his entry into the race to Alaska and other fun stuff, including his RowCruiser rowboats that you can sleep in. So I'm trying to get these podcast episodes out on a weekly basis for now, so that's it for the intro. We're going to move on to the interview with Colin. Take it away, Colin. Okay, it's September 10th, 2016. I am with Colin Angus. Colin, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a couple years since we chatted, and a lot of stuff's happened since then. You just finished the race to Alaska back in June, and maybe we'll spend a little time talking about that at first. So
okay.
Tell us... Just tell us about the whole adventure and how you got into it and why you did and what happened.
Okay, well, Race to Alaska, it really appeals to me for a couple of reasons. It's, first and foremost is it goes to a beautiful part of the world. You're going down up the Canadian West Coast. A large part of it's an area I haven't been in. So that really appealed to me. But also, it's just such a neat race. It's different from any other race out there. You've got the great humor that goes along with it, all the interesting characters that are involved, such an array of boats. It's quite a spectacle to regard both from within and as a spectator. So I just love the idea of it all, and of course, because I love boats and long distance journeys, it also appealed to that side too.
Yeah, okay. So you were going to enter last year, but you had an accident with your boat.
Yes, I've been teased relentlessly with that one. So it's supposed to be in the 2015 race, and we had the boat all ready and all the gear and everything. And we're out training regularly beforehand. And 2 days before the race, in 2015, I was going to do it with a friend, and so it was going to be a two-person attempt. And we were out training just off of Victoria. Came back and put the boat on the trailer. It's quite a bit of an ordeal getting the boat on every time. You have to undo the amas and all the sailing rig and pack it all in. So I did all that, and then I started talking to somebody in the parking lot before I was quite finished, and the final finishing part was putting the ties down on the boat, and then I hopped in the car. I kind of had that feeling of completion, and we were driving back home, and going around a corner, there's a sudden crash, and that's from that sinking feeling and that memory. Hang on, I remember what I forgot to do, and that was putting on the tie down. So, but it's obviously a bit of a deflating feeling at the time, having your boat broken in the concrete. But in hindsight, I think it all worked out great. It gave me an extra year. I patched it up with bit of epoxy, and it's a great thing about stitch and glue boats. You can always fix them up.
Yeah, right.
And then I made I was able to tend to a lot more details. When you've got an entire year just to sort of daydream about the race and think about different ways you can modify the boat, or not modify it so much, but just adding little things like a hiking board. I added a self-steering system with my water ballast. I had water containers with Velcro so they could go in the amas to help counter the heeling force, so I could row and sail with a very level boat.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So you fixed the boat and entered the race this year. So tell us a little bit more about your boat, some of the details. And this is your own design, right?
Yeah. So the boat is it's sort of almost an evolutionary process where I first created the central hull just for rowing, and we call it the RowCruiser. It's a boat that's almost 19 feet in length, and it has a cabin you can sleep in, and then you can row it quite efficiently, about the same speed as a sea kayak. And the beauty of that is you can just, at the end of the day, instead of having to set up camp, you just throw your anchor and you can sleep inside your boat. So I liked the idea of using that boat for the race, but then I thought, well, it'd be nice to have a sail on it. So initially I thought of putting a small sail, but I thought, well, to really maximize performance, I want to have a big sail. So I created a catch rig with about 78 square feet, and but of course now you need amas to counter the forces of the sail, because it's quite a narrow boat, and it's a canoe shaped. And so the amas went on, and so essentially is a small trimaran that can be rowed efficiently and sail with reasonable performance.
So I haven't heard the word amas before, Colin.
So amas is a relatively new word. When I say new, it's ancient in the Polynesian culture, but up until I guess a decade ago, most boaties referred to them as outriggers, and then it's more. I think it's more commonly used now, the term amas, which is a Polynesian word for outriggers. So it's ama, and then the akas. It's a little confusing. The akas are the cross supports that go out.
Really?
So amas and akas. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's sort of the multi-hull culture that sort of brought in that terminology. But I kind of use it interchangeably because I was curious about
that. What length are the amas in?
The amas are fairly short. They're 8 feet in length, and the reason why they're short is I didn't want to sacrifice the rowing performance of the boat. The oars extend out 9.5 feet out both sides, so if you have long amas, they're going to interfere with the rowing. So I designed it so they'd be just out of the way of a full oar stroke, so you don't have to shorten your stroke or anything else. You can just row normally, naturally.
So they're mounted aft of the rowing station then?
They're forward of the...
forward.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so on that boat, when you're sailing, if you're sailing, one of the outriggers is in the water, or both of them?
When I'm sailing, just one is in the water. So if I'm not sailing, neither is in the water. Obviously, it depends on how much gear I have. At the beginning, they're kind of just touching. But when it's lighter, they're just clear. And then when you're sailing, with the hiking board, ideally for maximum performance, I try keeping them out of the water. But of course, when the wind's heavy, they're being pressed in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you took your RowCruiser, 19 feet, and it's a stitch and glue boat, and you sell kits through Small Craft Advisor.
That's right. Yeah. Small Craft Advisor sells kits.
Okay.
And,
cool. Okay. Yeah. So tell us about the actual race this year, Colin, from the start.
The race was quite interesting. Again, the beauty of the Pacific Northwest here is the weather is always changing, and compared to the 2015 race where they had gale force headwinds down the Georgia Strait for the first week and a half. This year, it was kind of the opposite. There was a lot of calms. The faster boats in the fleet, they had winds for the most part. For the slower boats, the smaller boats, which of course I was part of, it was sort of very variable and light winds, mostly calms actually. So there's a lot of rowing, which of course is beneficial for me. For me, my boat offers reasonable sailing performance too. So wind is a perfect combination for my boat. Would be half wind, half calm every day, so I can get the advantage of the rowing, also get the wind. Yeah. But it tended to be a lot more just light winds or no winds. So
really?
So just a lot of rowing. There was a few windy days, and where I was able to just relax, and I had a self-steering system in the boat, so it really made it nice and easy. But on the some of the days were just a lot of toil, rowing.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. So you were the first boat to finish under 20 feet?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the first solo finisher too?
First solo finisher. Yeah.
Okay. So how long did it take you to get up there from Victoria?
It was 13 days, 1 hour, and I can't remember how many minutes, but a chunk of an hour.
So 13 days. So did you stop along the way to rest a little bit, or how did you manage
at nighttime I would anchor. So and Not always at night, but almost always. I'd find a little anchorage to go into, drop anchor, and then sleep in the cabin. My boat has a 6-foot cabin, so it's just long enough that you can stretch out. And the kits that we sell, actually, we've extended the cabin to the 6 feet 6 inches, but because there's a lot of people taller than I am. Yeah. People refer to it as a coffin, but it's actually, it's completely weather tight. So you're in there, you're stretched out, and I would sleep like a baby every night. You're so tired, and it's so nice and cozy down there. We had a lot of wet weather too in the race. So,
you did?
Yeah, so it was nice to be able to escape from that. Just pop in and be in your dry little cabin.
So a lot of rain and that sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, a lot of rain. But we always, when you're in the open water and have a bit of a breeze, you'll get the splashing too.
Right.
But most of the moisture is just coming from rain.
You wear a dry suit most of the time then?
Not most of the time. I had a dry suit, and I'd wear it whenever conditions were rough. But not when it was raining. I'd wear rain gear instead, because I find that rowing with a dry suit is just very it's restrictive, and you also get the moisture buildup because you're putting out so much heat. It's a very and that's a great thing about rowing is in colder conditions is it is a great way to warm up because you are expending so much energy. But that's something I've found over the years. I used to try rowing in a dry suit, but it's just so unwieldy. And rain gear is a fantastic way to keep dry too, and you get so much more breathing happening. I'm not really a big fan of the breathable rain gear though, like things like Gore-Tex and whatnot, which people you pay so much money for, because I find that when you're out there on a day where it's just pouring rain from beginning to end, it's not waterproof. It ends up leaking, and you end up getting soaked inside. If you look at what the fishermen wear, they never wear breathable rain gear. Instead, they're using that impervious rubberized or plastic rain gear, which is 100% waterproof. And as far as, of course, the concept behind Gore-Tex is that, it can breathe, so you're not going to get the sweat inside, condensing and getting you wet that way. But I find in the real, which works if you're in a day where it's like cloudy and you get showers on and off, sure. Right. But if you're out and just pouring rain, you're going to be a whole lot drier with 100% waterproof gear. And you can still get the breathing happening. As you're rowing, air is sucking in through the arms and up from the bottom and everything, and you're pretty dry at the end of a long, wet day.
So you stayed warm for the most part?
Yeah, I stayed very warm. That's something I paid very close attention to, was making sure I had the right gear. I actually went, I was looking closely at the race last year, and a big issue was people getting cold. And you've got your fleece and your innerwear.
Yeah.
And inevitably it gets wet when you're changing your clothes, or just from sweat, or the shower comes down before you have a chance to get your rain gear on. So I made sure that I actually had enough. I had a set of fleece jacket and fleece pants for every day of the race. I went to the
really?
Yeah, and I just went to the thrift shop and $5 a pair, and which is beautiful. So a wave splashes over, your fleece is wet, you just whip it off, put on another set, let the old set rot in the cupboard, and you don't care about because you can't dry it off out there. It's so damp and it just. There are sometimes you can dry it, but most of the time you just can't. It's a very damp, moist environment. So, it's. I think that was and I just stored them in nice dry bags, so they're always going to be sitting there, a nice, crisp, dry, warm fleece and fleece pants. It also had a whole set of puffy jackets too, because it really gets cold, and that's something that is easy to underestimate. But when you're sailing, in particular, rowing, you generate heat. When you're sailing for a long period of time in the cold night, you're just sitting there in the icy cold wind, damp.
Yeah. And temperatures in the 40s.
Yeah. And so with your dry suit, the most important thing is having dry innerwear in there. So if your fleece is all damp and wet and you've got your dry suit on, you're still going to be pretty cold. So take that cold, wet fleece off, put some warm fleece on, put your dry suit back on, and you'll be nice and toasty. So and fleece doesn't weigh much. So yeah.
Wow. So you got that part figured out pretty well, it sounds.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important in the rig. It's in the summertime here, you're at home and you're Port Townsend or Victoria, and you say, it's warm. It's never going to be too cold. But so when you're on your little boat, things change so quickly, especially when you go up north. And
right. So what? How much sailing versus rowing do you think you did on the race?
It was a lot more rowing than I expected. It was a lot of calm and I did a lot of row sailing too when the winds were light and so augmenting it with the oars. I'd say 70 to 80% of the progress is made with rowing, or perhaps a bit of sailing in there mixed with the rowing.
Yeah. What's kind of your average speed when you're rowing?
Rowing is 3.5 to 4 knots, so that's sustainable. So that's like I can do that for 12 hours a day. Wow. I mean, the longest I did was in one stretch, and it kind of stretched on from that, but it was 15.5 hours, and that was into light headwinds. So it was just very light headwinds on the nose, and I was rowing into it as the last day second to last day of the race, and I've never in my life rowed that long.
Really?
And then when I thought I was going to be able to anchor at the end of the day, what I thought was going to be an anchorage wasn't. It just didn't. I was looking at Navionics, and it looked like I'd be able to use this little bay as an anchorage, and it's a very exposed, rough stretch of shoreline. So I ended up going through the night. Fortunately, there's a little bit of wind that piped up, so I was able to sail through the night for about 5 hours, and the wind died, and I was back to rowing again. So another 8 hours or so rowing on top of that.
Really?
So that was a long day.
So
but that was the final stretch.
Yeah.
So I started at 5 in the morning the day before, and I finished in Ketchikan. I think it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon the following day with just a 5-hour little stretch. It was a break with sailing.
Yeah, so the advantage of rowing is you're going in a straight line, kind of.
You go in a straight line,
you're not tacking.
Yeah. You know, rowing is very reliable. I mean, obviously, headwinds will slow you down a little bit, but you know, you pretty much know what you've kind of got. That's one of the things I like about rowing is the reliability. You can really schedule in your, you know, what if I'm on trips, you know, paddling through the islands and whatnot, you know exactly how long it's going to take you to get to each destination.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, did you encounter you must have encountered some rougher water up there.
Yeah. There's a few days when things are rougher. I mean, the very roughest, ironically, was 2 days before the race. I sailed across to Victoria from Victoria to Port Townsend for the start of the race. Yeah. And it was
rough that day.
It was pretty rough, yeah. And you know, the neat thing about the Juan de Fuca Strait is you've got the such strong currents going through there too. So you get all sorts of really interesting wave formations as you go whipping along. You know, I really enjoyed it because I was wanting to further test the boat. Yeah. But that was the biggest water I had. The second biggest waters I had were when I was crossing from Vancouver Island to I can't remember what you call it now, but the entrance into Bella Bella area. Okay. It's notoriously a rough stretch of water just because you have the big sill, which where it's very shallow coming out of the Johnstone Strait, and then it drops down into the deep water, and you have the currents coming off there and just sort of mixing with the winds, and you get sort of quite a mix. And it was when I crossed that, there's a gale warning in effect. But in my favor, so I wanted to take advantage of that. It wasn't quite as rough as they forecast, but it was pretty sloppy seas and big swell, and I felt pretty comfortable. I had the sails reefed down, and I feel comfortable with my boat's capabilities. But you still, it is daunting, seeing the power of nature, going past Cape Caution, just seeing the waves crashing, into the air, and there's boomers all around. That area is full of like submerged reefs, so you see them, and the swell was so big that fishing boats would disappear for 20 seconds at a time. So they're gone. You're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 20, and then finally you see them again. And it's the effect isn't that huge in your boat, but you're looking at these reefs that are 100 yards away and just like exploding, and you're out in the middle of nowhere thinking, wow, if you made a mistake in navigation and ended up in that, that would it'd be curtains.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is your boat self-bailing, your cockpit?
It is self-bailing, yeah. I put in an Anderson self-bailer. It's kind of humming and hawing as to whether or not I would do that, because you don't get a lot of water coming in, but when I'm sailing super hard in bigger waves, you do get a bit of water. And but you do, of course, get a little bit more drag. And plus, they are prone to leaking inwards. So when you close them up, you know, on a nice, warm, sunny, dry day when the bottom of the boat would otherwise be dry, you often get a little bit of leaking. And so you kind of have a wet floor. But overall, I think it was a good idea to have that. It was reassuring, you know, when things were rough and waves were crashing over the boat, that the water was all being sucked out. It's a pretty small cockpit, so I mean, you're never going to be in danger of having too much water in it, but it, of course, slows you down. If you've got a foot of water slopping around in the bottom there, it's going to create just a little bit more drag.
Both ends of the boat have watertight flotation? Watertight compartment? Yeah,
so the boat, including the Amas, is comprised of 7 watertight compartments. And when I say watertight, I mean some have hatches on them, so they're not 100% watertight. The Amas are fully sealed. They don't even have bungs in them. And then there's a forward compartment that's got just round inspection hatches in the main cabin, so it's pretty sealed from the elements. And so I always felt confident. The boat, I really underbuilt the boat. The central hull is 100 pounds, and the ones, you know, which is 48 pounds less than the standard recreational version.
Oh, really?
Put 3-ounce fiberglass on the outside instead of the thicker 6-ounce, and just cut every corner I could. So, you know, if I hit something hard, it would, it would very likely hull. But at the same time, I never felt that was a danger. It would just, you know, I'd end up limping to shore because I have so many different flotation chambers. I mean, I know they said that about the Titanic, but really, you know, any big solid break in any portion of the boat would just result in being slowed down.
Okay. So you save 50 pounds of weight by building it lighter.
But you know, I wouldn't recommend that for anything but racing purposes, because you do have to be very gentle with it. You can't just drag it over the rocks, or even if you dropped it, it would probably put a hole in it. So
I see.
So it's
more tender that way, huh? Yeah. Okay. So what was the most challenging part of the race for you, Colin?
It's hard to say. I mean, the most challenging part, it's kind of consistent, I would say, throughout. I mean, it is grueling. I really do enjoy rowing, though, and long distance journeying. So, you know, overall, I find it a pleasure being out there, the solitude, and just the ever changing scenery and the challenges. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess, you know, all kind of equally challenging and enjoyable at the same time.
So there weren't any points where your life was in danger or anything crazy?
No.
Unlike some of the other participants, maybe, huh?
Yeah. I mean, there was I had I guess the closest call I had with, you know, damaging the boat was when it was at right at the beginning in glassy calm conditions. It was inside the Gulf Islands. I was hoping to get out through Porlier Pass before the current changed, and I didn't make it in time. It was just hot and calm, and it was rowing as hard as I could. So I got there quite tired at the entrance, and everyone was saying that there's lots of wind in the outside, while where I was glassy calm. And I thought, if I just had a bit of wind, it'd be so nice after all this rowing. And after like the third boater who came by and said, "Oh, there's lots of wind in the outside," I thought, I got to try making it out. And that was full current at that point, so it was coming through at about 4 knots. And so it was tacking and rowing, because there was a little bit of wind coming through the actual passage itself. I'm tacking through, and it's pretty. I was just barely making progress through it. It's through I'd gotten through basically the thick of it. It was almost at the entrance, and then right at the entrance, or at a big whirlpool opened up and spun me around, and my sails filled, and it dragged me into the eddy. And the eddy was just, you know, because of the strong current, is just sort of tumultuous waves and whirlpools, and it slammed me into some rocks. I thought I did some major damage, just by the sound of it. It was a huge crunch, but upon later inspecting the boat, it was just a little bit of splintering in the back part of the dagger board.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But that would have been the because it's basically just my impatience to, I wanted to keep making progress. I kind of kept rowing on the inside in the glassy wind, because that's in the Gulf Islands, kind of on the inside versus the outside. Yeah. But I was so tired, and I thought, if I can just get some wind, I'll be able to make some. It seemed like so close, just on the other side of that barrier that things are going to suddenly get easy.
Okay. So did you see a lot of the other participants along the way?
A little bit at the beginning, but after a couple of days, you're pretty much on your own. You don't really see. You see a lot of boats out there. Pleasure boats, fishing boats, commercial boats, but not much in the way of other competitors.
Yeah, and do you have a way of knowing where the other boats are that are competing?
Yeah, same way that the spectators do. Yeah, so I would check the tracker whenever I had solid reception, which was surprisingly a lot. I was when I went around Vancouver Island a few years ago rowing, there was a lot less reception than there is now. So
really?
So,
it's improved, huh?
Yeah, it's improved quite a bit.
If you were going to do the race next year again, which it doesn't sound like you are, but if you were, what would you do differently?
Well, I think if I were to do it again, I think I'd use a totally different style of boat, just because, I always like to do things differently. I think I'd go for an entirely human-powered vessel. So I'd use an entirely different sort of concept and design.
Oh, really?
And, probably a two-person boat so that you can go 24/7. But,
some pedal drives in it, in addition to rowing, or not?
Either pedal drive or rowing. I think, pedal drives have really come a long way in the last few years. I think Race to Alaska actually has been a great part of the resurgence of, well, not resurgence, but surgence, I guess you would say. There's no re there, of different types of human. And, pedal drives are the good thing about them is they're easier to incorporate into boats that are designed for sailing primarily. The rowing can be complex with getting the geometry, having the oars clear of obstacles, and especially in beamier boats. But the actual efficiency of pedal drives is definitely increasing, and it's something which, as far as I think it might be a little bit more sustainable for a guy can row for 12 hours, but it is pretty challenging rowing for 12 hours in a day. Whereas pedaling, I think, just because your legs are kind of designed to work hard for a longer period of time, I think is a little bit easier for most people. So yeah. Okay.
So what's coming up for you in the future?
Well, we've got through the winter. My wife and I are just be very busy we've got 2 kids, and with Angus Rowboats and our Angus Adventures business, we do a lot of speaking. So we'll be just doing the home-based stuff, taking the kids out in little adventures. Long term, we've got a few different projects on the back burner. Most of them sort of depend on whether we get other organizations involved. There's one that's so I probably shouldn't get into the details there, but we're working with a production house in Toronto that likes the idea for a concept. Well, they've actually got a producer on board, or not a producer, a broadcaster on board for it, but it depends on getting another company involved, so we'll see. But we're for me, Angus Adventures is all about daydreaming, and for every project we do, we probably come up with about 5 or 6 ideas, and sort of juggle them around for a while, and whichever one sort of seems to be the most financially viable and work with our existing plans is sort of the one that goes forward. So
it's always nice to pay the bills, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to spend too much on your adventures,
especially with the family. The costs go up.
Yeah, exactly.
Astronomically. So for those listening interested in your boats or speaking or just more about you, what should they do? Where should they go?
The 2 places to go are Angus Adventures, which is where we've got all the information about our books and speaking and adventures and stuff, and then Angus Rowboats for information on our rowboats. So that's angusrowboats.com and angusadventures.com. Okay.
And do you sell kits for your boats then?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
So we sell kits for the RowCruiser and then 2 other designs. The Expedition model, which is kind of like a big kayak, except that you use it's a sliding seat system instead of a paddle system, and then the Oxford Wherry, which is a very light, pretty open boat.
Okay, and those are on your website too?
That's right, yeah.
Cool. All right, well, thanks for being on the podcast today, Colin. Anything else you'd like to add for our listeners?
I guess I just say how much fun I'm having here at the Wooden Boat Festival. It's just such a fantastic event, and somehow every year when I come here, the sun is shining, and it's just a fantastic place to be. I think Jake has got a direct dial with the weather gods.
I think so.
Yeah. He calls up the ornery weather for the race to Alaska and the sunshine for the Wooden Boat Festival.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Colin.
Well, thank you so much for having me,
All right,
Dan.
take care.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Colin, for joining me for the podcast. I appreciate it, and I wish you the best for all your future endeavors. And for those listening, if you'd like to connect with me, you can do so by email, woodenboatdan@gmail.com. If you buy stuff on Amazon, please go to my link, hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon. Then make your purchase. I get paid a small commission, which helps pay for the podcast. If you're not in the wooden boat game, you need to get in because it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it tremendously. I've been in the wooden boat game since I was a kid, growing up on wooden boats on the Columbia River. Anyway, hope you have a great week, folks. Tune in again next week. We'll have another great podcast episode for you. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. Wooden Boat Dan, over and out. God bless.